Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Match It and the Other Guy, the podcast which happens. Today we're sitting outside my place down on Lake Wylie, we being my friend Kevin and I. We had a lot of rain over the weekend and the skies are overcast and grey today, but it is very calm and lovely out there, Kevin. And today, Kevin, what is our topic of conversation?
Well, I think this time of year I start kind of reflecting back on what were some of the great toys I had growing up, the ones that brought me a lot of happiness and memories. And I kind of was wondering what of those were memorable to you, and which ones were ones that we had on both sides of the pond, and what were maybe exclusive to England that I may have never heard of.
Toys and games from Christmas time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or whenever. I mean, just growing up, what was important to you?
Well, I was very into Action Man when I was growing up, and one of the main reasons for that is we were very fortunate to have in a town called Colville, which is reasonably close to where I spent my childhood. We had the Palitoy factory, and
I have heard of that.
Yeah, so Palitoy, well known for making toys, and a lot of my parents' friends were employed by Palitoy, and Palitoy used to make Action Man, which was the equivalent of I'm going to say like G.I. Joe, like little soldier figures, 12-inch, 15-inch high soldier figures, different uniforms and that sort of thing. Yep. And Palitoy used to make them. And so one of the great advantages of having friends of the family who worked at Palitoy is they were allowed to buy, the seconds and rejects and the things that were going cheap that didn't quite muster up. That's right. So my parents, as in everybody's parents at the time, were always looking for a bargain to keep the kids entertained, and so a lot of our toys came from Palitoy. But Action Man was a big part of all of my group growing up. We all had Action Men, and of course the different uniforms, and we would swap uniforms between friends, that sort of thing. So Action Man became a big thing, yeah. And then we had there was a basic Action Man that was just very plastic looking, and the hair was also molded plastic. And then second generation Action Man came along, and second generation Action Man actually had like realistic hair, and rubber movable hands that could hold the rifle and that sort of thing. And then came along Speaking Action Man. You'd pull a cord in chest, and he would say one or two recorded phrases. Yeah. So how about you?
Oh, there's so many, but G.I. Joe was actually a little before my time. So by the time I came along, that already kind of had its day. But I remember having one called Big Jim, and it was similar, but it was smaller. It was definitely smaller in stature, almost like a Barbie size, where G.I. Joe was much bigger.
Okay, right.
But I had that early on, and they had I remember having a dune buggy with a trailer on it that had a fishing boat.
Wow.
So that was like his fishing set, and I had a airboat.
So Big Jim sounds like, is he like a fan of country sports and rugged outdoor activities?
Just an all-around action man, actually, kind of like yours.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Sounds like that way.
Yeah,
Big Jim.
It seems like I remember there was, like if you pulled his arm up like you were making a muscle would form on his bicep.
Oh, wow.
Seemed like that was familiar on him.
It's kind of sophisticated technology.
I think it must have been made by Mattel, who made Barbie. Okay. I think it was kind of their attempt at doing something for the boys.
Right.
Because I think it crossed over. I think Barbie had the same dune buggy, but it was in pink kind of thing. I think they used the same molds. Yeah. But I remember having him and a few pieces along with that. And then you would go through like what was the hot and popular would be like the hot thing and be like Evel Knievel was a big deal with me. That's early on. I remember that as one of my first big things I was into.
Yes, I remember having an Evel Knievel figure on a motorbike with a little plastic ramp built into the box, and put a couple of batteries in, and Evel Knievel would jump over the ramp.
They might have been different in England. Ours, you'd crank them. You had a little crank, and you'd put the back wheel, and the gear would connect with the crank on the starter or whatever, and you crank it by hand. Yeah. And then once you got it going really good, and you let go, it would connect and take off.
Oh, well, cool.
And it would jump, whatever, and flip and flop and all that. And it's kind of funny how I got my first Evel Knievel was the motorcycle with Evel on it. I got it for behaving myself as the ring bearer in my sister's wedding.
Oh, well done.
That was what they bribed me with to keep me from throwing the pillows up in the air. Because they found at rehearsal I was wanting to throw the pillows up in the air while I was bored.
Yeah.
And they kind of made a pact with me. If you do what you're supposed to do, afterwards you'll get this Evel Knievel motorcycle. And I still remember getting it out of the closet when we got back that evening.
Well, that's a good lesson in life, isn't it, really? Like, do this task, do it well, and you'll be rewarded for it.
All children should be bribed, maybe. may not be the best policy in most situations, but this time it worked out.
Yeah. Well, it's a lesson in life, yeah. I was... I don't know if it was unusual in my group of friends, but I would always take exceptional care of anything that I was given.
I did too. We're two peas in a pod on that.
Yes, I had a friend who lived on a farm, a genuine farm. I didn't used to live on a farm. I lived in an old sort of abandoned country house. But one of my school friends lived on a farm, and he was super bright, super intelligent kid who was destined for great things in academia. Unlike many of my peers. But he was, I remember to this day, like, sticks out like a sore thumb, he was the world's worst at taking care of his toys, and it used to bother me as a kid. The boxes would be broken and pieces would be missing, and if it had a series of cards, some of the cards would be ripped, or they'd have drink stains over them, and it used to drive me crazy.
Well, because you can't play. You're ready to sit down and play with whatever, and it's hard to do without all the elements.
Yeah, chess sets or. That sort of thing, and 3 of the pawns would be missing, or we'd try and set up a chessboard and it had no bishops or something strange, or the king would have had its head bitten off by the dog. I think, why did you stop the dog doing this? But yes, there's some kids, you and me included then, that would take great care of things, and others which just kind of didn't do that.
Yeah. It would frustrate me to no end to find, it's in the toy box somewhere. Well, what do you mean somewhere?
Yeah, where is it exactly? Yeah, so if it was, like games such as Monopoly or Risk, is Risk known as strategy in
No, we have
USA?
Risk.
Okay.
There's also Stratego.
Stratego, that's what I'm thinking.
Stratego and Risk are 2 separate games.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so all of those games Risk was a box full of tiny pieces, wasn't it? There's all sorts of, there was different pieces for soldiers and different pieces for pieces of artillery, and then there was sort of triangular pieces for cavalry regiments and all these, but the whole, it was a box of very small pieces, I remember, and some kids would take great care of them, me included, and that all the pieces would be put back in the little plastic, like Ziploc bags, whatever it was at the time, and the cards would have a little elastic band put around them, and anything that needed an elastic band to keep them in place, and if it wasn't supplied in the box, I would ask Mum or Dad for an elastic band, because it should be like that.
Exactly.
It should be kept. Yeah.
I very much did the same thing. Now, I think part of it is I'm not an only child, but my sister was 17 when I was born.
Okay.
So we essentially grew up separately.
Okay.
So we grew up each kind of only children.
Right.
So I think it is easier when there's nobody in the house else messing with your stuff.
Yes, yeah.
But that, to that point, you mentioned I would take something out of a box, play with it. When I was done, I would put it back in the box in its proper order, in the cardboard where it needed to be, package the box up, or set it back up on the shelf where it needed to go.
Now, do you think that what we used to do, and I think it's coincidence, or maybe it's not coincidence that we both used to do that, do you think that is something that gets carried through into later life? And personally, I'm thinking of, when I started my career as a mechanic, that idea of organisation and taking care of things and putting things where they need to be just became second nature. And when I was working in Formula One, there is no question that everything had its place and a place for everything, and you better take care of everything, and everything was pristine. I think those lessons in life get carried over.
Oh, I think they definitely do.
Yeah. Yeah, so you found that as well, and you're a much more organised person than I am.
Again, my wife just laughed. There was a giggle somewhere.
Well, I think you are. Well, you got this podcast up and running for a start. You've organised all of that. I mean, my contribution is just sitting here having a conversation with you. You take care of everything else. Yeah. I do remember one game, which is another Palitoy game. Oh, and this plays in precisely to what we're talking about, taking care of things. It was a game from Palitoy that was given to me by my parents from their friends who must have, got it at a discount from work. It was called Haunted House. And it was a little bit like Mousetrap, where there was a board and there was a series of rooms that formed the haunted house the rooms were constructed, or the walls were constructed by 4 pieces of cardboard that connected together with clips, little plastic clips. And the walls were clipped together, and then the walls were clipped to the board with these little black plastic clips. But they were particularly brittle plastic back in the 1960s and 70s. And 2 or 3 of my little clips broke, despite the fact I was extremely careful with them. And I was very upset with myself for breaking them, because I didn't realise, it wasn't really my fault. But of course, you don't kind of figure that out when you're a kid. You just know you broke the clip. And I asked my mum to ask her friend if she could get some replacement clips from Palitoy to replace the ones I'd broken. And I had to wait sort of a fraught 2 weeks, wondering if these little clips would ever arrive. For my
fretting frantically over these.
Exactly, but she came through with these little clips from Palitoy. She managed to get me some replacement clips, and I was so pleased to have them. The game was now back to pristine condition. But yeah, so Haunted House. You walked, you threw a dice, and you walked clip clop through this house, and if you landed on the wrong square, you dropped a ball bearing down the kitchen, down the chimney, which was mounted in the middle of the board, about 12 inches high, and then through a series of plastic ramps built into the chimney, the ball bearing would fall into one of 4 or 5 rooms, whatever it was, either the kitchen or the lounge, or and if the ball bearing knocked your piece over, your little guy over, you had to go back to the start.
So you're always in peril when the ball drops.
Peril. Yeah, so that was Haunted House, but yeah, great game. Must try and look for it.
No, we're probably going to end up on eBay after all this trying to dig up some old stuff.
That's right. Yeah. So were you I'm going to ask this: were you a fan of board games? But I think your answer will probably going to be the same as mine. Is if you grew up as an only child, it's very difficult to find folks that want to play with the games when you're a kid.
That's
you
true.
need other kids your age. You need your peer group to play with. And as we've said before, you said there's quite an age difference between you and your sister, so you kind of grew up on your own.
Yeah.
And I grew up kind of physically on my own, kind of isolated from my friends just by distance. I mean, the nearest, my friends all lived down in the village, which was, 4 or 5 miles away. And as I say, I kind of grew up in this wonderful old abandoned country house, which is a great story for another podcast. But I tend to be sort of isolated. So although I had these great toys, it was actually very difficult to find anybody to play with me. I'd be sitting there sort of building this wonderful haunted house, or Mousetrap. You'd spend,
we had Mousetrap.
Build Mousetrap, and I was fascinated. Here's another thing that I was fascinated by the mechanics of the Mousetrap when you built the Mousetrap.
It's like a Rube Goldberg, is that the name of the person?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Very much one of his systems, it seems like.
Yes, you're right. Again, you had a ball bearing, right, and a plastic bathtub where the ball bearing would drop down the bathtub, and you cranked something over to make it start, and there's a little chap sitting in the bathtub, and he got flicked out.
He would flip out.
Yeah. And I was absolutely enthralled with this. I was enthralled by the mechanism itself, how it all worked. And of course, I'm convinced that all of this is stored in one's mind and is used later. Like when I became interested in mechanics, car mechanics and engineering, in a way, it's the same thing, isn't it? We're just playing with more sophisticated version of a mousetrap.
Yeah.
A Formula One car is just a sophisticated mousetrap.
Well, A has to happen for B to happen, right. And then C to happen.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, it's funny mentioning kind of being isolated when you're playing toys with your kid, as yourself.
Right.
Like Lego was a great way. Anything you could build with and stuff.
Yes.
That was almost better by yourself because you're doing it the way you want to do it and putting it together and all that.
Yes.
But that was a big one. I got one of those sets fairly early on. It must have been fairly early on with Lego coming out, because it was just mainly the bricks that we know of.
Yeah.
It had like a plastic base.
Yes.
And then I think it had two of them that were wheels, so you could attach to it and then make a car or something similar, wagon or something with wheels.
Yes, and there was, if I remember right, we referred to them as like sixes or eighters or fourers or twos. You know, there's little.
Oh, how many pegs on top?
Yes, exactly that. The small size bricks and bigger bricks and bigger bricks, and
and of course look at the gargantuan toy company that Lego has become. And I think it's still many consider it on lists to be the number one toy of all time, which I wouldn't argue with. You know.
Yes, I was reading. Gosh, I don't wish this to sound pretentious. I was reading a book about philosophy not so long ago, which gave a sort of rough background of philosophy through the ages, called Sophie's World. Wonderful. It's a wonderful introduction to the field of philosophy. But without wishing to digress, there's a section in that book where the author is talking about Lego. And why is Lego the greatest toy in the world? And his explanation was, well, fundamentally, it is like the molecules or atoms all around us. You can take the Lego bricks, build a particular toy, a particular design, it can be whatever you want, and then the next day you can strip it all down again and build it into something else. And the author's point was, you know, a tree is no different to us, to a fish, to a mountain lion. It's all constructed of the same things. You just have to build them in different ways. That's where we're going. And his idea of Lego was exactly that. It's the greatest toy in the world because it can become so many different things.
Unlimited, literally unlimited.
Yes, but when I was a kid, we had no. Like you say, Lego, the company Lego, has gone from strength to strength, but we had no ability to. We probably didn't have the money to buy the expensive toys, but there was no such thing. Even allowing for the fact that Star Wars didn't exist in the 60s, there was no equivalent of buying, you know, a spaceship that was built of Lego designed on a particular craft. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, like there is now.
Yeah, they were just like building sets.
Right, they were just building sets.
They were just
yes,
whatever size you got. You might got more in a more deluxe set or something like that, but it's more of the same bricks, or maybe added a little element of something.
I love them, and I do remember the only colours that I had were red and white bricks, and I guess
no, mine were multicolored.
Yes, well we never had that.
Well, and there was always other companies like Bricks Blocks, and there were some other ones that tried to be Lego.
And talking of Lego and therefore construction sets, did you have Meccano? Did that make it across like an engineering set with little, almost like Lego, but it was made of steel plates or mild steel plates and little nuts and bolts that you screwed together?
That in the U.S. is Erector.
Oh, okay. Is it Erector
set?
Right.
And I would, if you had asked me what Meccano was as a kid, I'd have no clue what you're talking about. But in later years, I've heard of Meccano now.
Yes.
As an adult.
Yes.
But it was Erector here, and I really never had those sets. I didn't.
Yeah, I love those. And again, I'm sure that sits in the back of one's imagination to be used later in life. But I used to love playing with Meccano. And again, that desire that clearly we both share of taking care of things and making sure everything is put back exactly where it should be. Meccano was put together with the tiny little screws and flat nuts.
Yeah.
And you had a little screwdriver, flat-bladed screwdriver, and a little spanner stroke wrench to fasten the fasteners together. But of course, if you lost the little nuts and the little screws, you were doomed. You couldn't put anything together. So, I mean, I used to take incredible care to make sure everything was put back in its right place. And, yeah.
Yeah, one other one that's really popular that I really never had these either, but you hear, I think you mentioned it in A Christmas Story, is Tinker Toys.
What were
they were like little long dowels, and they'd have round wooden discs. They would have a hole in the middle and then holes around. So you could connect them and then have it come out from that. And you just make interesting shapes or whatever and such like that. Yeah.
So it almost looks like...
and they were around for decades and
looks
decades.
Like a bit like a DNA model.
Yes.
Isn't it? Right?
Yes. It could very much look like that. So, but again, I knew of them. I just never had them.
Yeah. And they were called... What were they
Tinker
called?
Toys.
Tinker Toys.
Tinker Toys, because obviously you tinker around with them.
Ah, okay, yeah.
And then I did have Lincoln Logs. Have you seen those?
No, if you'd have asked me what a Lincoln Log is, I would have said it was a piece of candy from our previous conversation about sweets and
exactly.
candies. Yeah.
No, it was literally little looked like things that you build a log cabin at. It was a long cylindrical, almost cigar-like looking
Yeah.
piece of wood with a notch, where like if you're
really?
really building a log cabin
Wow.
and you'd connect them, and you could build these great cabins. And they had roof slats and little plastic chimneys you'd stick on top.
No kidding.
You could build different things with them, but
Yeah.
mainly it was to build a cabin or a house or a whatever, and you could do all different. Like I would do a cantilever one. Remember the barns that are kind of like it's got a small base and then it's bigger on top?
Yes.
You could do those because you'd have longer pieces and you'd put it on the square base at the bottom. And I'd often make a corral. I'd make a fence around that part too.
Wow, yeah.
So I didn't play with those a lot, but a lot of times, in the evening when mom and dad would have primetime TV on or something like that, I'd pour them out on the floor and make something. Quite often, I incorporated the Hot Wheels. I'd have an opening at the bottom so they could have a garage space.
Sure, yeah, I get that, yeah.
And because that's another one that I think has to go down as one of the greatest toys of all times is Hot Wheels.
Yes.
And I looked this up fairly recently because I actually posted on Facebook kind of a thank you to Hot Wheels a year and a half ago maybe or something like that. What other toy for 99 cents of that quality can make a kid happy? And they're still 99 cents. How on earth? They started in...
You mean the price now is still 99 cents?
99 cents.
Okay.
Yeah, they're someplace more. But
Right.
when they started them, this is what, 1968 I think it was? They were 59 cents. How in 50 years they've only gone up 40 cents is mind-boggling.
I don't know. I guess.
And they're still fantastic little cars.
I guess production costs have dropped. I can only assume that. I mean, the company still wants to make profit.
It's
surely.
Mattel, and I think
Yeah.
it's unreal. And the details fantastic. They're quote guaranteed for life.
Yes. We used to have those in Matchbox cars as well. Did you?
Oh
Have
yeah, Matchbox
cars?
Matchbox was here before because Lesney, it's how it's pronounced, that makes Matchbox.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's Lesney.
Yes. Now you said that. I think. Yeah.
They were shipping to they had those in the U.S. long before Hot Wheels came along, so they were here before.
Really.
But I think Hot Wheels really kind of overtook them through the years.
Yes. I had a fair number of Matchbox cars, more than Hot Wheels. Again, I wonder if there's a Palitoy connection there. I don't know about that. Maybe
I think
was.
Matchbox was an English company.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I think that parent company was English.
I wonder if Palitoy had a connection, whether it was through distribution. But I do remember, not just our family, all my school friends, we all had Matchbox cars. And I had this wonderful, and I don't know where it came from, but I had this wonderful collector's case for Matchbox cars. It was blue plastic.
I've still got one.
Open it up, and it was, and the top layer of cars were like in little orange plastic cages, and you took one layer out, and underneath was another.
I've got the exact one.
Have you really?
Sitting in my closet at home right now. And they had different sizes of them and stuff like that too. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, Hot Wheels came out. They were a Mattel company or a Mattel product, and Mattel is the one that did Barbie and all that. So they were very, very established. And when they came out, the Matchbox cars were fairly kind of slow. They created these. The Hot Wheels were fast. I mean, when you put them down a track, they would go.
Yes.
And then eventually Matchbox kind of had to come along with their kind of similar design and make theirs faster and such like that too. But in the States, Hot Wheels have really taken over, and they do a lot of sponsorships and different kind of tracks.
And I'm guessing that, like early baseball cards, football cards, some of the early edition cars are very collectible.
Definitely. And there's, I think one of them is a certain one that they only did one color of. I think it's called the Beach Bomb, and it's a Volkswagen Bug Volkswagen bus.
Yeah.
With surfboards, and I think it worth somewhere like $100,000. I think it was on Pawn Stars at one time.
Wow. Because you could buy yourself a really nice V-dub bus and kit it out with all of the surfboards you wanted for, I'm going to say about $100,000. You still end up with something.
Yeah, the real ones have gone up quite a bit as well.
Yeah, still end up with something pretty nice.
And that was always a good memory. I mean, I remember Hot Wheels from my earliest days, always having those.
Yeah.
In fact, if you find pictures of me as a kid, I'm usually holding a Hot Wheel in one hand or the other.
Yeah.
But occasionally, it wouldn't happen every week, but I still remember Saturdays going to Kmart with my dad, and he'd let me pick out a Hot Wheel.
Wow.
So that was always nice.
I remember the tracks as well. Again, probably more for Matchbox cars and Hot Wheels, and I'm sure they were very similar. So there'd be sort of 3-foot lengths of plastic track that used to clip together, and you could make a loop-de-loop.
It was Hot Wheels here.
Right.
Yeah, Hot Wheels is the one that, I think they were the first ones to do that here. It is the orange track.
Yeah.
And it had little purple connectors.
Okay.
And they still have orange track. My daughter has orange track Hot Wheels.
Wow. I do remember one of the problems with the Matchbox track that we had over in England. If you tried to make the loop too tight on your loop-de-loop part, it would kink the track. You know, it would bend the plastic, and then of course you were doomed. It would, and this goes back to what we were just talking about, taking care of stuff. If you kinked a piece of that track, it would never be the same again.
Yeah.
Right. You'd see the orange track would change colour. You'd get that high. It would be a high stress area, and the plastic would change to white. Right?
Yep.
You get that white mark on it.
About.
Yeah, and it would never go away. And that piece of track was never the same again. It would become, in my world, it would become a B track. You'd have to put it somewhere else.
Only use if necessary.
It only used if necessary. Yes, because it was less than perfect. But that was the problem. That was the problem that we had. We were just so careful with everything. As soon as everything got marked, and again, we've talked about this, I think, with music. I would buy albums and only play them once and record them onto cassette so they would never get scratched.
Yep.
I've gone through my entire life doing that sort of crazy stuff.
Well, but like I say, I think alluded to this one time before, is like taking care of those things that were from 40 years ago or something like that. Now in the collector's market, you served yourself extremely well, because those are the ones that are valuable.
Yes.
Original boxes.
You took the words right out of my mouth. It's original boxes if it's particularly if it's in an unopened box. Like if you had one of the original 1977 Star Wars figures that were made back then, and it's in an unopened blister pack, for example. That's the thing, isn't it? It's a bit like, I'm rather fond of books, but in the book collecting market, it's the dust cover that makes the massive difference to the value of first editions.
True.
A first edition is one thing, but a first edition with the dust cover that hasn't been price clipped and it's in pristine condition can make a book soar in value or drop like a stone in value if you haven't got that with it. Yeah. And how are you with chess? Did you take to chess as a kid or not so much?
I'm trying to think that when I even played, I played a little bit. I must have had maybe one friend or something like that, maybe a couple through the years that kind of enjoyed it. We'd sit and play, but not very often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad was reasonably keen on chess, and he taught me to play chess as a young kid. My dad, he wasn't the most patient chap in the world, and if he thought he was being put into a losing position, if he thought I was beginning to get the upper hand on him, he'd quite often just kick the board over on the table and then claim that it was one of the dogs that did it, and one of the dogs has run past the table and the chess pieces would be on the floor, and that would be the end of the game, So we'd replay, and it was half in good spirits, but he didn't like to lose. But I do remember, that sort of father-son moment when the son beats the father. I do remember that very game where I first beat Dad at chess.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a turning point. Yes,
and he was very gracious about it. And he said, "You have genuinely beat me. I did not help you win that game at all. You are now better at chess than I am."
Yeah.
And I'm no great chess player, but it's a game that I like to play. I think I like the strategy of it. I like to study it, and I'm that's something that gives me pleasure. But yeah, Dad would often kick the board over when it was going wrong.
Oddly enough, this must have been between 6th grade and 7th grade, like that summer. I think that's when it was. I had this one friend, and we end up pretty much every day playing a game of Monopoly.
Oh, yeah.
We would just end up at his house at some point during the day. Actually, his parents both worked, so we kind of had run of the house. But we would sit down at the kitchen table and usually play at least a game of Monopoly about every day that summer.
Yeah. I have played Monopoly. I've got to say, it's not a game that I particularly enjoy playing. It always seems to bring out the worst the worst in folks that are playing. I don't know if that's a reflection of capitalism or what it is, but I don't know. That sort of desire to win at Monopoly, it becomes consuming, doesn't it?
And it can take a while.
It can take a while too. Yeah.
Well, nowadays, I mean, it seems like when you get into adult parlor games and such, it's more like fun games that make everybody laugh, or trivia, or such like that. It's more the way that's gone.
Yeah, I tell you what,
things I enjoy now.
It was called Cluedo in England, and Clue, I think, in the States.
We had Clue.
Yeah, and I bought a version of that fairly recently, and I like to play that with my girlfriend, and it's a great way to pass a couple of hours. But what we have done is to expand the number of variables slightly. So, off the top of my head, it's things like who committed the murder, in which room, with which weapon, right? So it could be, Miss Peacock with the candlestick in the library, and then we started to introduce what time did it happen, and we've made a little number of cards. And again, going back to just what we're discussing about taking care of games, I've made another category of cards to play with Clue. And copied the cards exactly as they come out of the pack. So we have another set of packs now with the time that it happened on, and the motive has become another one. Yeah, it just expands the game out a little bit. But we enjoy playing Cluedo. Yeah, but that was another game. I wonder if that was also Palatoy. I would think all these things came from the factory in Colville.
Well, yeah, here most board games and stuff were. Hasbro, Parker Brothers, Milton Bradley. Those are three that I can think off right off the top of my head that were really big game manufacturers. Whether they went under a different name in England,
I don't know. I don't know.
Distributed them, maybe it was different.
But we had this great connection with the Palatoy factory in Colville, as I've said, which certainly helped us out as children. And I have to say, my memory of just Christmas in general. Although we were very much working class, very much, living from pay packet to pay packet, and the family was always much wealthier at the start of the week than it was at the end of the week until Mum and Dad got paid again. We always had fun things to play with on Christmas morning. We always had a few presents to unwrap, and the fact that they were probably seconds and they weren't perfect made no difference as a kid. It was just the excitement of playing with them.
Well, it adds a unique memory now that many wouldn't have the same,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I used to love Christmas as a kid. But again, it was not a matter of ripping all the paper off all the presents immediately and, throwing games around the room and losing everything. It was very much unwrap one present at a time, inspect it and see what it is. And, this is a pontoon assault set. I remember that was another one with these little plastic soldiers. But so it had I think it was American soldiers and German soldiers and probably a pontoon bridge that was built across the Rhine in the Second World War. But the fun part for me was building the pontoon bridge. And again, make sure all these pieces are kept in pristine condition and they all clip together. And then at the end of the playtime, they're all put back in the box, and the box was in perfect condition. Yeah.
Well, one of my highlights, whether it was Big Jim or a Star Wars toy down the line, is applying the stickers. I love to put all the stickers on.
Yeah, well, you mean like on the little transfer stickers that you get? Yes, I know.
Decal stickers, transfers, however you wanted to call them.
Yeah.
Putting those on was just amazing because you had a empty palette in front of you and you knew where they were supposed to go.
Yeah.
And that was always one of my highlights of Christmas morning was putting the stickers on all the toys.
And it was magic technology, really, for me. I was so amazed with those little transfer stickers, decals, whatever we want to call them, where you used to just lay them in a saucer full of lukewarm water, right? and that would activate the glue, and then you'd slide them into position and then try and squeeze the air pockets and the water away out of the little decal. And again, going full circle, Kevin, it is precisely what we did with the decals on Formula One cars.
Yep.
It's exactly the same process. Yeah. You used to put the decals on the car at the track. I mean, if you're doing it at the factory, we'd have folks that would do that for us, But if we were doing it at the track, if we had a chassis change, then all hands on deck, and the mechanics would do this. But it was exactly the same, trying to put the decals on the car and make sure there was no air pockets trapped in there. Mm-hmm. And if we ever did find a little pocket of trapped air, we would take a very small needle or a very sharp scalpel and just pierce the bubble and push the air out of it and seal it. Yeah.
Well, quite often you change liveries a little bit, race to race.
Yeah, sure we did. Yeah, we used to do it quite often. Yeah, great fun.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a subject we're going to have to come back on, because I think we could talk toys for quite some time. So I think we'll revisit this one later down the line again.
I think it's a great topic to talk about, but not merely because the fun of the toys and the fun that we clearly both shared of taking care of them, but how these lessons pass through from childhood into adolescence into adulthood, and the skills that you learned as a 6-year-old taking care of things are carried over into building an F1 car. I mean, it's basically the same thing. Attention to detail, the love of it all. Yeah.
If you're someone that grew up with not knowing where anything was in the toy box, they might not want to let you loose on a multi-million-dollar race car.
Maybe not. Well, there we are. Look at that. 35-something minutes we've been chatting for, and that's going to have to bring us to the end of this particular episode of Matched and the Other Guy. Gentle listener, I hope you've enjoyed spending some time with us. Kevin and I down at the lake in Lake Wylie in Charlotte. It's beautifully calm and quiet down here now, isn't it? All the noise is gone. Look at that.
Quiet.
A little bit of construction work over to our left, but the lake is absolutely silent. Join us again for another episode. Bye-bye now.
Bye.